Music playlist containers are, however, not the only way to create dynamic music. So let's take a look at what other options we have available to us. And this time we'll import some new music. This time let's bring in the tension music. And you can see that we have a variety of tracks here. But this time, rather than clicking and dragging these tracks in, let's bring in the whole folder. And you'll see that it shows up as a virtual folder. Let's change that to music segment, and then we'll be bringing in each of those files as a music track within that single music segment. So let's take a look. Here you can see that we have the music segment containing its music tracks, and over here you can see all of those tracks. So just to see things a little better, you'll notice that you have plus and minus signs over here, and we can select that minus sign just so we can see all of the tracks in question. There we have a bass pad, a bass synth, drums, horns, and piano. You'll also notice things don't look like it's lining up quite right, so you can see that we have a 105 BPM once again. Let's change the tempo. The tempo on everything has changed at once because we only need to change the tempo on the parent container. And now you can see that all four of these have a length of 4 measures. So let's set that up. Of course, we're bringing the execute to the 5 because that's the end of the 4th measure. And none of them have pre-entries, but some of them have post-exits. And you can see that right here, you've got a post-exit on the bass synth, you've got a post-exit on the horns, and you have a post-exit on the piano. Let's give it a listen. And we'll have to unpin Explore because that's still pinned, which means that no matter what we're doing up here, it's always selected. And we can select MX Tension, pin that, and give it a listen. So that's a little bit more exciting. So if there's a section of the game where there's some enemies and you have to hide, then maybe you want to play some tension music instead of that more happy-go-lucky explore music. And that's what this is for. Now you may be wondering why we don't have any variations here. This is going to loop very quickly. It's going to get really boring. As a matter of fact, we can't loop it from within this music segment container. So let's place it inside its own playlist container. We can call it tension. Populate it with that single music segment container, send our loop count to infinite. We can select that and pin that top level, and now we can hear it loop forever and ever, and it will be very repetitive. I'm already getting bored. So how can we do this without using multiple music segments? If you take a look in here, we can select something that we have some variations for. You'll notice over here that we have music tension variations, and in here we have variations for the horns and for the piano. So we can bring those in. Let's take a look at how. Let's go down to our horns track first of all, right click, and now you want to select, look at this, we have options to change this track inside this music segment to a switch, a sequence step, and a random step container. Now we can look at switch a little later. For now, I want to take a look at random step. We'll select that, and you'll notice this vertical blue bar, and that is representative of this being a subtrack for this track's randomizer. So you can right click, add subtrack, and you'll notice that within that single track, we are adding these subtracks, and it will always pick within one of these. It will select one of them, but never play them all simultaneously. If you were to select sequence step, it would turn green, and that means they would always play in order. But today we want some random step, and if you take a look, we have 3 more horn tracks. So we'll come back over here and we'll create 3 subtracks in addition to that original one we have. And now we can select our horn tracks and we can actually click and drag them directly into that subtrack. You'll see they all show up in the same place, but it's really easy to just click it over, drag it down onto its own track. And now we have variations. Now these Fs stand for force. So if you want to test this out with a particular track, you don't want to hear a random track, you want to hear a particular track, you hit that F and it will force just that track to play. It won't be randomly selecting between this. And it's really important to know that that is not going to find its way into a sound bank and play in game. Even if you leave one of these checked, this is just for testing purposes inside Wise. It is completely ignored in the final functionality of the game. So let's just give it a listen. We'll uncheck that for now. We want to hear what we have here. Now you may have noticed that the first run around, we heard that first horn track play 2 times in a row. So that is one consideration when you're working within music segments. You have a lot of functionality in here, but it's a little more limited than when you're working on higher levels of hierarchy. So for example, we do not have the option in this random container of changing this between standard and shuffle. It's just going to play standard randomization. We cannot select the shuffle option. It's just important to know that you have some limitations. So let's do the same thing with piano. We'll set this up as a random step and create 3 subtracks, and now we can click and drag those piano tracks in there. Same thing again, just bring them down into their own tracks. Now you may have noticed while I was clicking and dragging that some crossfades were automatically showing up, and you can manually create those, so you can still do a little bit of editing right here in the track. You can create fade ins and fade outs by using these tiny little triangles in the top corners of the tracks. You can also duplicate a file. If you grab this big blue square in the bottom right hand corner and drag it out, it will create a duplicate of that file, allowing you to very easily loop a file if you wanted to do so. Just have to zoom in again to get that back to its original position. But already I can see that that wasn't snapping, that's not working, and that's because I have a feeling, yeah, we have the wrong tempo. So let's go back to our top level container. We forgot to change this BPM. So now it's at 105, and now everything should line up properly. Let's go back down to that track we were just messing with, and we can get these all to snap perfectly to their original positions. So now we have variations in the piano and the trumpet, and this loop is just going to sound so much more interesting. You can play even more though. So for example, you could add a subtrack and not put anything in it at all. This means that there's a 1 in 5 chance that there is no piano that loop. Maybe you want that. You could also copy one of these tracks down here and change the way it plays. So let's take a look at what that means. Right now, by default, low pass and volume are selected. Let's unselect those and you'll see those lines go away. We'll zoom in just for a little more exactment so you can really see what I'm doing here. Let's select low pass and you have this blue line show up. So you can actually move this, and this is a fade. So if I was to play this now, let's say I'm going to hit force and I'm going to solo this track. So you see that the top is like an extreme low pass. We're not even hearing the piano at the very beginning, and then it slowly fades in as that low pass releases. So maybe you want to create a little bit of extra functionality. You can create some custom sounds. You can double click to create a point, and then you can click and drag that, and you can really create some interesting sounds. You can do the same thing with a high pass or with the volume, and you can even move the play cursor over here, right click, and select split on play cursor. This will give you sections to work with and really start doing some basic editing with your sound. Now I'm just going to Control Z this. I don't really want that here, but just know that you have a lot of options in how you control variations of your sounds. We'll zoom out again. And you can already see there's quite a lot going on here, and this is just in one single segment container, which you might remember previously we were using to contain only a single track. So as you can imagine, there's a lot you can do with music segment containers within music playlist containers. And now you see that there's also a lot we can do within music segment containers. Single-handedly, we can create a lot of stuff in here that's going on at this level. So of course, we can in fact combine versions or sections of this method with what we looked at before with the explore method, so that you can have a music playlist container playing various segment containers that in themselves have a lot of different variations and things going on. Right now, in our music segment containers for Explore, we have everything burned down, right? So if we listen to this, all of the different instruments in this music are played in a single track. We've got the drums in there, the horns, the piano, everything is playing in this one track, but they don't have to be. We could in fact have brought all of this out of our DAW and placed it in separate tracks as stems of instruments, percussion section, and so on, and had variations within each one of those if we had wanted.